Good morning. It is Saturday, November 21st, and it is the first day of a 9-day staycation that I'm doing over the Thanksgiving holiday. We have half of the week off next week, and then I decided to take the rest of the week off just to kind of chill out and not do anything. So I thought I would maybe also try vlogging for the first time ever, which I think I'm constitutionally opposed to, but I have a lot of time on my hands this week, so we'll see how it goes. I got off to a kind of late start this morning, but I'm gonna chill for a little bit and keep reading Nothing Ever Dies by Viet, Nguyen, which is one of my nonfiction November reads. It's the only nonfiction November read besides an audiobook that I've been making any progress in, and I'm about 2/3 of the way through. So I'm hoping to finish it this weekend and then maybe get one of my other nonfiction November books read this week. It is like a beautiful day outside, so I am gonna read a little bit and then maybe go for a walk or a bike ride just because the sun is gonna set in like 4 hours. So I'm going to drink my coffee, light a candle, read a little bit of this, and check in with you later. I am having a quiet Saturday night in tonight. I went for a bike ride this afternoon, which was nice, and then I am going to make some blueberry bread, which I've made this recipe before and it turned out just okay, so I'm not really sure why I'm making it again, but I think it was mostly just that it was a little bit dry because I left it in the oven maybe like 5 minutes too long. So I'm gonna try it again tonight and hope it turns out a little bit better. I'm also going to make a crumble to put on top of it, even though every time I make a crumble, I feel like half of it just ends up falling off the top, but we'll see how it goes. I just finished reading Nothing Ever Dies, and I thought it was really fantastic. I know I dunked on it a little bit in my nonfiction November TBR just because of the kind of academic jargon of it all, and there definitely is quite a bit of academic overwriting in this book. I think partly because Viet Nguyen is definitely, you can tell that he's a novelist. He will always use like 7 adjectives when he could have used 1, but I also think part of that is just the way that academic writing kind of encourages verbosity. He's also just such a beautiful and elegant writer, so it didn't bother me that much. And it's just so rich with all of these different wonderful reference points, and also just gives you this catalog of other jumping off points to kind of further explore these topics of war and memory. Definitely want to read more about Cambodia. There's a whole chapter in this book about Korea's involvement in Vietnam, which I had never heard about. There's a huge section where he gets into Apocalypse Now that's really fascinating and has some really great close reading. I'm not always a fan of close reading, but I feel like there are instances here where he does it just so well. I will obviously talk about this more in my nonfiction November wrap up, but those are my initial unvarnished thoughts. And I think next up I will probably read the Henry Dumas biography, so I'll maybe try and get started on that tonight. It is now Monday evening. The sun has just set, and I am going to sit down and do some work on a video review for White Ivy by Susie Yang. I originally read this book on NetGalley a couple of months ago, and then got a hard copy when it came out at the beginning of this month because I thought it was phenomenal, just like the best kind of pop lit fic that I've read in a long time. And so I'm finally sitting down to work on a long overdue video review that I meant to do a few weeks ago. And so I thought I would sit down and kind of show you how I normally plan out, structure, and then ultimately script my videos. And tonight I'm hoping to kind of get through all of my notes that I took on the book and kind of a rough outline, maybe first draft, and then tomorrow hopefully polish it up and maybe have a chance to film it. I feel like I'm always overly optimistic, so we'll see how it goes. I always start reviews by going through the entire book and looking at all the passages I highlighted and any notes I took in the margins or in the notes section of my Kindle or phone. I'll then type up the quotes I think are interesting into a Google Doc, where I'll also jot down ideas and themes that are jumping out at me from the notes I took while reading. If you think this is overkill, not to mention inefficient, especially for a side hobby, I would agree with you. But in-depth book reviews are the kind of booktube content that I find most rewarding to make. When a book is worth it, I really do love to sit down and think deeply about everything it has to offer, not just to me, but maybe to other readers too. So I do tend to approach full-length reviews the way you might approach an essay, and I find it helpful to collect all my notes and quotes in one document, just so I can see everything in one place as I start scripting a video. So as I'm going through the notes and highlights that I made when I was reading the book, I feel like I'm not only being reminded of everything that I loved about this book, but I'm also seeing these breadcrumbs that Susie Yang lays very early in the book that I didn't pick up on when I was first reading the book, obviously. And now that I'm going back and rereading some of these passages, I'm just like, wow, this is just such a tightly plotted book, and she weaves in so much stuff that you don't even realize is there, but then going back, it's like this whole book is just like tight as a drum, which is really great. And one of the things that I like about kind of going back and looking closely at everything that I highlighted, I feel like working on this review is just giving me an even greater appreciation for how great this book is. So this is what my notes document usually looks like once I've gone through the whole book. Kind of a mess, but also something I'll reference many times as I'm working on the review. Then I start scripting, and by scripting I mean writing out literally every single word I plan to say. I don't outline my reviews, but I will sometimes make subheaders of topics I want to touch on in the review. So here you can see that I think there are a lot of interesting parallels between White Ivy and The Great Gatsby, and so I'm planning to focus this particular review around the idea of where White Ivy fits in the canon of American dream literature. But from this point on, I really have no idea what I'm going to say, so I usually just start writing into the void, basically, and hope that I'll end up with something that makes sense. So now, please enjoy this montage of me doing exactly that. Hello and happy Thanksgiving. It's already Thursday. I'm trying to wear my festive Thanksgiving whatever. I feel like yesterday ended up being kind of a wash, just like way more hectic than I was expecting with a bunch of errands. Somehow I ended up walking like 20,000 steps, which was not something I intended to do. I've also been momentarily defeated by my White Ivy review, which is not ideal, but that's also what happens most of the time. Perhaps I'll be able to salvage it tomorrow. I did just film my nonfiction November reading wrap up, so at least that's out of the way once I edit it. But anyway, I am doing a solo Thanksgiving this year. One of my amazing friends ordered a Thanksgiving dinner that she ultimately didn't need, and so then I went and picked that up last night. So I'm not really doing anything besides I think maybe making some potatoes and Brussels sprouts. I also might make some pumpkin cake if I have all of the stuff for it, so we'll see. We're doing a family Thanksgiving Zoom in a little bit, and then besides that, I think I'm just going to kind of chill out for the rest of the night. It is the Friday after Thanksgiving. Last night's family Zoom dinner ended up being really nice. My little brother even joined, and he's normally pretty anti-FaceTime, so that was fun. And my older brother's girlfriend tuned in from Korea, where she is currently doing a pretty hardcore quarantine to try and see some of her family. So yeah, it was just kind of cozy and sweet and a lot nicer than I thought it was going to be. Today I am meeting up with some friends to go on a walk in the park, but before I headed out I wanted to give you a quick update on some of my reading. So I'm currently reading Visible Man, The Life of Henry Dumas by Jeffrey B. Leake. Henry Dumas was a poet and short fiction writer in the 1960s, and I'm not super far into this biography, but because I don't really know much of anything about Henry Dumas, I feel like it's pretty interesting so far. And then while I am reading that biography, I'm also making my way through Knees of a Natural Man, which is a collection of Henry Dumas's selected poetry. And this is a new edition from Flood Editions. I'm actually really impressed with the kind of beautiful packaging on this book too. It has this kind of surprising and unexpected green end paper, which is nice. And then the kind of title pages to each section are really beautiful. I'm also a big fan of just the layout of the cover too. So I feel like there are definitely poems in this book, particularly in the opening section, that feel very 1960s. There's kind of a lot of allusions to Africa, and he uses a lot of kind of Swahili terms, and there's a lot of musicality and just like energy to the way that he writes that feels very vital in a way that feels 1960s to me too. I don't know, I'm not like an expert on that era of American literature or Black American literature, so I am glad that I'm reading the biography of him while reading this book, because I think it will offer kind of some insights into the period that he was writing at and his literary peers and things like that. But even without that background info, because I'm not super far into the biography yet, I do feel like this book is pretty accessible. For the most part, the poems in here are not super opaque, which is nice, and I think even the ones where I'm a little bit fuzzy on the meanings of what he's talking about, I think collectively you kind of get a sense of just like the vibe of this book. And I do feel like the more that I read of this book, the more I kind of have a sense of the rhythm of his writing, and the more I feel like I'm kind of getting into a groove with the musicality of his writing. For example, there's this kind of stretch of lines in a poem called Son of Mississippi where it says, "Bear stalk and sun walk, I hear a boll weevil talk, 'cause I grew up beside the ox and the bow, beside the rock church and the shack row, beside the fox and the crow, beside the melons and maize, beside the hound dog, beside the pink hog, flea hunting, mud grunting, cat fishing, dog pissing, in the Mississippi, rolling on and on. So there's some really kind of nice stretches like that in here. So yeah, I'm really enjoying it so far. In other news, I recently decided to DNF a contemporary romance that I was reading called 40 Love by Olivia Dade, who is also author of that new book, spoiler alert, that I feel like has been making the rounds. Since reading The X Talk by Rachel Lynn Solomon earlier this month, I have been kind of trying several contemporary romances in an attempt to kind of find a book that makes me feel as warm and happy inside as that book did. And I thought that this one might do the trick. It follows this assistant high school principal named Tess, who is at this island resort getaway for her 40th birthday, and she's there for 2 weeks and kind of starts to have a fling / starts to fall in love with her 26-year-old Swedish tennis coach named Lucas, which I thought was going to be really cute, and I thought the age gap thing would be intriguing, but unfortunately the banter in this book has been killing me, like in a bad way. I hate it so much. It's like both too sexually explicit for my taste for like tennis court banter, while also being extremely not sexy and just like cringy and lame. Like the number of times that both characters refer to Tess's boobs as her ginormous rack is like putting me over the edge. I can't deal with it. And I feel like I was trying to kind of get over it, being like, no, like it's still cute, whatever. And then I would just like hit more banter where I was like highlighting it, being like, I hate this so much. So anyway, I tapped out of that one at like 50%. And my search continues for another good contemporary romance. I do have Get a Life Chloe Brown out from the library right now. So maybe that will do the trick if it's not a case of overhype. But anyway, I'm heading out soon, so I will check in with you later. Happy Saturday. I had a pretty kind of lively outdoor sort of Friday yesterday, so today I have mostly just been kind of chilling inside and not doing anything. I've been reading a little bit, I've been watching some TV, and otherwise have just been kind of vegging out and staring into space. My library hold on this book called A Lover's Discourse by Xiaolu came in a couple of days ago, and so I started reading it this weekend, and I can't remember where I first saw this book, but I'm pretty sure that I put it on hold because it has the same title as A Lover's Discourse by Roland Barthes, which I read part of when I was in college and have always kind of meant to go back and read in full. And this Lover's Discourse, a novel, is definitely a reference to Barthes, and at a certain point the characters start directly talking about A Lover's Discourse by Barthes. But this follows a Chinese woman who moves to the UK right when Brexit is happening to do her PhD, and so she's going to be there for the next 3 years. She's initially kind of quite lonely and alienated in London until she meets this German-Australian guy, and then they start to fall in love. And so I'm about a third of the way through so far, and they're currently living on a boat in a canal. So this book is following their relationship, but it also contains a lot of her observations and thoughts about kind of China versus the UK, language, nation. And I think that a lot of her observations about kind of the West through Eastern eyes are quite sharp and wry and often very funny. And like I said, there's also some stuff in here at the beginning about sort of the loneliness of being in a new city and a new place, and how that's kind of exacerbated by issues of language and foreignness and all of that stuff. And yeah, so I don't really know where this book is going exactly, but I'm enjoying it so far. So hopefully I'll finish that in the next couple of days. And then I was talking to a friend this morning who recommended this show on Netflix called Mismatched. And I watched the trailer for it, and the two main characters' names are Dimple and Rishi. And I was like, wait a second, is this based on that book When Dimple Met Rishi, which was, I feel like, a super popular YA book a couple of years ago? I didn't read it, but I feel like I saw it kind of everywhere. And it turns out it is. I guess they must have like renamed and repackaged it for the Netflix adaptation. But yeah, it's just kind of a really cute show. The girl who plays Dimple is really wonderful, and then the whole cast of other characters is also really fantastic. I feel like a lot of the kids in the show, like the characters, are but it's very realistic, and just like the vibe, even in a few episodes, feels very like high school. So I've watched a lot of that today, and will probably keep watching it for the rest of the night. So anyway, that's kind of what I've been up to today. Not a whole lot. So love and life. It is Sunday, the last day of staycation, the last day of this vlog. Thanks for hanging out if you've made it this far. To be honest, I never really thought I would ever make a vlog. I feel like my inclination with this channel has always been to talk about books and basically nothing else, but I do think this has been kind of a nice distraction during a week when I was feeling sort of lonely and kind of sad about being alone for Thanksgiving this year, which ultimately ended up being completely fine. But as I'm sure many of you have been experiencing, this has been a year, and particularly a like fall and winter, of many ups and downs. And I feel like for the most part, I'm like completely fine, like 80% of the time. And then 1 in every 5 days, I'll just like plummet into despair. So yeah, any type of distraction or something to help make the time go faster is good. I do feel like I'm starting to see a little bit of like the light at the end of the tunnel, and I hope that you all are too. I hope that you're all kind of hanging in there and staying as safe and healthy as possible. And in the meantime, I feel like I'm just leaning on the candles, the tea, the cozy socks to kind of take the edge off of the long winter ahead. But anyway, thanks for hanging out with me for a little bit. I don't have a whole lot of plans today besides heading over to McNally Jackson to do a little bookish Christmas shopping. So I thought I would leave you with some final ambient music, a look at the last of the fall leaves in New York, and some good looking bookshelves. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.